Hey, this is Skipen. I'm back with another illustration breakdown. This is a video series where I break down my drawing process, and during a time-lapse replay I talk about the tools that I used and anything that comes up that I think I could mention. With Valentine's Day so close, this time I decided to go with a Valentine's Day theme, and I'm using ibis paint on the iPad mini 5, and this ended up being a 4000 by 3000 pixel drawing at 350 dpi with over 60 layers, so pretty intense stuff for a small device, but it held up pretty well. Towards the end of the drawing I did experience some slowdown in ibis paint, but I think it's just kind of like an older app, so it's not as well optimized as, say, Clip Studio Paint. And ibis paint is one of the original drawing apps that was available for iOS. Back in 2011 it came out, and I was trying to use it with, say, like the Wacom Bluetooth styli and other styli like that. It was very difficult before the Apple Pencil came out, so I'm really happy to be able to go back and try out ibis paint again with the Apple Pencil, which is just a really good experience on, say, the iPad mini 5, because ibis paint is a little bit more of a beginner to intermediate app, I would say. Of course there are pro level features, but it's just fun to do it all around and sketch, and this drawing ended up being actually pretty fully featured, full color illustration on, an app that I'm not as familiar with, so it was a little bit difficult at the beginning, but I intend to do a proper review, so stick around to see that. As like I said in the last video, I'm trying to have some more dynamic poses and even show some sort of story during the drawing. So this is an interesting pose. Maybe the character received a gift and she's sitting on the floor and really happy about receiving a gift for Valentine's Day is kind of the theme that I went with. As with any new software or apps that you try out, at the beginning it's always more difficult to sketch because you're trying to learn the tools and the functions, but I think ibis paint in particular has an older design philosophy or language, and it hasn't really been updated that much since its release, so it can be difficult when you get used to newer apps like Clip Studio or Procreate that have been updated constantly, and even new apps, PaintStorm, other stuff like that. Going backwards like this can be a little bit difficult, but I find that if you push through, you can really find some brushes and tools that you like, and ibis paint is chock full of brushes. There's tons of different resources and functions that you wouldn't see on another app, and you can use them for free a lot of times if you watch like a little ad, or if you want you can pay about $10 and unlock all of it permanently. And now we're getting on with the coloring. Ibis Paint is surprisingly fully featured as a coloring software. Sketching was good, line work is kind of hit or miss, but coloring felt great. If you look at some of the artwork that people have made with Ibis Paint, it's very like anime style, and the coloring is often pretty good considering it's a free app. So as you'd expect, you get a lot of tools and functions for coloring in an anime style. I really like the pen fade tool. It's kind of like the type of brush that I always talk about, a standard round brush that has a taper at the front and end for the opacity, so you get some soft coloring. But I did find it pretty easy to color with that Photoshop style brush, and I tried out a few different brushes during this initial drawing as I go to test ibis paint. What's really nice is you can see there's lots of different textures and other things built into ibis paint. You see that on Clip Studio, but you don't really see that on a lot of other apps. These like jeans textures or flower patterns, different things that do come in handy when you're doing illustrations or comics and other things like that. And I did want to take some time here to talk about the time-lapse replay feature. As you can see, I'm actually recording my iPad screen. Normally I just like to use the time-lapse file, but ibis paint is pretty limited as far as its time-lapse features. It'll automatically record in the background, but you're limited to a 300-second clip if you try to export just like a video file. And also in that video file, it records all the gaps that you weren't drawing anything. So if you look at something like Procreate or even Clip Studio Paint, in your time-lapse export, you're not going to have these blank spaces where you didn't do anything. Say you got up to get a cup of coffee or something, that all ends up in the ibis paint file. For whatever reason, when you play back the file in the actual app, it doesn't have those gaps. And now we're getting started coloring the hair. It's always one of my favorite parts of an illustration, and that's no different in ibis paint. I did try to stick to my normal coloring process, but I didn't find the right brush that has the level of like pen pressure and taper, like having a sharp edge. So what I ended up doing was just continuing to paint, paint, erase until I formed kind of the shapes that I liked. And then I would take an eyedropper tool and pick a shade slightly lighter or slightly darker and use that to really smooth out and make a gradient with the hair. And if you have any questions about how I color hair, it's not always easy to talk about it in these videos. I try my best to explain it as best as possible, but if you want to know something more specific, please feel free to reach out in the comments and I'll try to explain it. This is around the point that things start to slow down, maybe like 35 layers in. So sometimes zooming in or zooming out or trying to change layers took some more time. And of course that can become more frustrating, and it leads to you not actually putting 100% of yourself into the work. But in the end, I still feel like I did one of these tentpole pieces that I could use for my review and feel good about. I do think that due to the limitations of the software, if you're someone that uses a lot of layers, you're going to have to compromise when it comes to the more complex aspects of an illustration. So if you color hair like I do, or if you do clothes more complex, you might want to try to simplify it a little bit when you're using Ibis Paint. Ibis Paint also has a lot of different blending modes which come in really handy. It's nice to be able to put down something that's like color burn or multiply just to give it some more depth, and maybe screen to make it a little bit lighter. And then even coloring the eyes, I just felt like I went a little bit more simple, and maybe that just speaks to the whole experience that I had with Ibis Paint. I was able to do a lot of things that I normally do, just at a slightly limited capacity, whether it was from the software slowing down a little bit or the brushes not being as complex as what you'd find on more professional level software. But if you're someone starting out with illustrations like these, I think it's a great place that you can learn how to draw, learn how to paint, learn tools, and a lot of that stuff will transfer later down if you switch to Photoshop, Clip Studio Paint, Paint Tool Sai, because there are a lot of things that seem familiar. And if you're coming from those software and kind of downgrading to use Ibis Paint, you might just want to cap your expectations as to what you can do or how much the software is going to kind of accommodate your more pro level style. And the limitations of Ibis Paint pushed me to have fewer layers, which made me kind of use a more painterly style, blending different colors from what was initially more of a cell shaded look maybe. But I think that these limitations do force you to work in a different way. It really makes you more creative, and I really enjoyed the experience. If you're a professional that wants to try something different and challenge themselves, it's a great free app that you can still work with. And I found the painting experience for a semi-realistic image to be very nice as well. Anime style was great. Sketching felt great. So far no real complaints other than the fact that it's an older app that has kind of a older design philosophy. But I'm going to be diving deeper into it with more drawings, hopefully more illustration breakdowns, and eventually I'm going to have either a full review or a video essay, so please look forward to that. And please feel free to reach out in the comments and ask any questions that you have about my style of drawing, about Ibis Paint, anything like that. It really helps me try to improve myself, but also make the reviews and other videos I do more informative and more helpful. Let me know what you think. I'm Tsukaben, and thank you so much for watching.